NFL players risk it all on the field. From Dak Prescott, whose leg snapped in a horrifying 2020 injury.
Prescott breaks the tackle.
Prescott breaks free, but then there's Darryl Stingley. One hit and his dancing days were done. We're talking about the most bone-chilling wrecks in league history. Now, Dak Prescott. That mess in 2020 wasn't just an injury. It was a scene straight out of a horror show. He was tussling with the Giants in the third quarter, scrambling for yards when his right leg got pinned under a big old defender. Ankle twisted and snapped quicker than you can blink a compound fracture with bone poking right through the skin. The whole stadium went quiet as a tomb. Dak sat there clutching his leg, tears welling up because he knew his season was dust. They carted him straight to the hospital that night to clean out the wound and bolt that shattered bone back together. It hit everybody hard. Even Jason Garrett, his old boss, walked over to check on him. The timing of it all, just cruel. Dak had been wrestling with the Cowboys for 2 years over money, stuck playing on a 1-year tag worth $31.4 million. He wanted 4 years. They stood firm on 5. Neither side blinked, and then crack time's leg gone before he could sign the big paper. Off the field, it kicked up a dust storm about contracts and how much risk these players actually carry. 1 second, he's a star. The next, a big question mark. But Dak's tough as leather, he healed up. Now, hold your horses. This next one's worse. Cam Skattebo. This rookie season ended in a fashion that'd make your skin crawl in 2025. Playing the Eagles, the Giants runner tried to snag a ball over the middle when his leg got caught in a trap under a defender. Going down, his foot turned completely sideways, looked all kinds of wrong. Everybody on that field knew it was bad news instantly. Some folks couldn't even look. Trainers came running while Skattebo lay there in a world of hurt. Right ankle suffered an open dislocation bone through skin again. Broken fibula, torn ligaments, they had to cut him open in Philly that same night. The crowd went silent before tipping their hats to the rookie as he was carted off, leg wrapped tight in an air cast. Coach Brian Daboll called it a gut punch. Even the rookie quarterback Jackson Dart was visibly shaken up. Dart had just thrown him an 18-yard touchdown, then had to watch that tragedy. Called it the ugliest part of this game. Skattebo stayed in the hospital a few days, but he's back in Jersey now, starting the long climb back to health. Docs reckon he'll be ready for the offseason, but make no mistake, it's going to be a long, rocky road. Moving on, here's a story that nearly stopped the world. Damar Hamlin. January 2nd, 2023. Monday Night Football. Buffalo's Damar Hamlin drops on live TV against the Bengals, shocking millions. Hits T. Higgins, stands up for a second, then drops like a stone, motionless. Panic spread like wildfire. His heart had quit. 24 years old, and in cardiac arrest. They called it commotio cordis, a freak accident, rare as hen's teeth. Happens when a hit to the chest comes at the exact wrong split second, throwing the heart's rhythm into chaos. Medics worked on him for near 10 minutes, CPR, the shock box, everything, before getting a pulse, rushed him to Cincy Medical in critical shape. They called the game off, something you almost never see. The whole sports world stood shoulder to shoulder for Hamlin. His little toy drive fund went from pennies to over $9 million in days. Folks called his survival a bona fide miracle. By April 2023, 4 months after nearly dying, he was cleared for football. That comeback brought a tear to many an eye. On the flip side, Alex Smith took a hit so bad folks still whisper about it around the campfire. November 18th, 2018. A dark day for Washington football, I tell you what. Sacked against the Texans, and his right leg snapped instantly. Tibia and fibula shattered. The sound and sight were enough to turn your stomach. Smith knew right away he was in deep trouble. Rushed to surgery, but the nightmare was just getting started. Flesh-eating bacteria set in necrotizing fasciitis. That's a rare and nasty killer. Infection spread like wildfire. He went septic. Doctors were seriously talking about chopping the leg off just to save his life. Over the next months, he endured 17 surgeries, going under the knife every few days to cut out the rot. Spent weeks in that hospital bed, hooked up to IVs, fighting infection and staring down despair. When he finally got home, he was in a wheelchair with a metal cage drilled into his bone for near a year. Physical pain was hell. Mental battle was worse. Smith admitted he felt trapped, lower than a snake's belly, and guilty for needing the pain pills. Called it a dark place, tried to be the tough guy and kept his mouth shut, but he didn't fold. After 2 years of grueling rehab, he got the green light in 2020, defied every prediction, and marched back onto that field. The same leg that nearly killed him carried him back to the NFL, won Comeback Player of the Year, and he earned every bit of it. Next up, Zach Miller, a fella who nearly lost a limb. October 29, 2017, Chicago tight end faced a true horror story. During a tussle with them, New Orleans Saints, Miller pulled down a ball in the end zone that looked easier than pie, just a regular over-the-shoulder grab. But when his boots hit the grass, that left knee of his bent backwards, something awful. Folks watching didn't know it yet, but this wasn't just some standard banged-up knee. We're talking a full-blown crisis. Miller didn't just pop his knee out. He tore the popliteal artery, the main pipeline feeding blood down to his lower leg. In the blink of an eye, his leg was starving for blood. Trainers swarmed him while he hollered in agony, and once they got him to the hospital, the doctors gave it to him straight. Without surgery right that second, they'd have to amputate. Miller was begging him with tears in his eyes, "Please, don't take my leg." Surgeons worked for 9 long hours, taking a vein from his good leg to patch up that busted artery. He spent 8 days in the ICU and over a month trapped in that hospital bed. Over the next stretch of months, he went under the knife 9 separate times, just to rebuild that knee and salvage what little movement he had left. Come 2019, after fighting like hell to walk again, he hung up his cleats for good. Now, hold on to your hats, cause this next one is so ugly it'll leave you speechless. Johnny Knox. Back on December 18, 2011, Bears receiver Johnny Knox took a hit that stands as one of the spookiest things ever seen on a field. Ended his whole career in a heartbeat. First quarter against the Seattle Seahawks, Knox snagged a short pass and accidentally coughed up the football. He dove to grab it back, but defensive end Anthony Hargrove plowed into him like a runaway freight train, folded poor Knox backward so far, his spine bent in a way God never intended. Grown men on both sides turned their heads, too sick to look. Knox lay there still as a stone while the medical team sprinted out there. They hauled him off to a Chicago hospital where the news was grim, fractured vertebrae, and some mighty severe nerve damage. The very next morning, they fused his spine to keep him from being paralyzed. Doctors said he was within an inch of never taking another step. The road ahead was rougher than a cob. Knox spent weeks battling pain that would make a grown man cry, struggling just to move. He had to learn how to walk all over again from scratch. Even after working his tail off in rehab, he couldn't run or stand too long without hurting. By 2013, the writing was on the wall, his football days were done. The Bears cut him loose, and Knox retired at just 26 years old. Now, this next fella suffered a knee injury so nasty it could have put him in the ground. Nick Chubb. On September 18, 2023, Browns running back Nick Chubb took a hit that goes down as one of the ugliest in modern history. It went down in the second quarter against the Pittsburgh Steelers, right there on Monday Night Football for the whole world to see. Chubb was charging toward pay dirt when safety Minka Fitzpatrick went low to cut his legs out from under him. That hit snapped Chubb's leg backward violently, twisting his knee so bad ESPN wouldn't even air the replay. Troy Aikman said on the broadcast, "We ain't showing it. It's as bad as you can imagine." Chubb grabbed his leg and stayed down, clearly in a world of hurt. When they finally carted him off, fans from both sides stood up and cheered him on. The doctors confirmed the bad news: a torn MCL, busted meniscus, and damage to the medial capsule. That was curtains for Chubb's season, with the team calling it a mighty significant injury. What makes it spookier is that this was the same knee Chubb wrecked back in 2015 at Georgia, when he dislocated it and tore up a bunch of ligaments. Even though the 2023 crash was awful, doctors didn't have to rebuild the whole thing, so there's hope he might get back in the saddle. Moving on, here's a player who never walked again. Darryl Stingley. Way back on August 12, 1978, during a preseason tussle between the Patriots and Raiders, 26-year-old Darryl Stingley went up to snag a pass. As he leaped for that ball from Steve Grogan, Jack Tatum slammed into him head-on like a runaway truck. That hit snapped Stingley's 4th and 5th neck bones, leaving him paralyzed right there on the grass. It was a heartbreaker of a scene. The whole stadium went quiet enough to hear a pin drop as trainers rushed to help him. The verdict was a broken neck and a severed spinal cord. Stingley's football days were over before they even got him off the field. He spent the rest of his days in a wheelchair, only getting a little movement back in his right arm. But he didn't let it sour his soul. the man showed true grit. He became a beacon of hope, visiting hospitals and writing a book called Happy to Be Alive in 1983. He even started a foundation in Chicago to look after kids who needed a helping hand. In 2007, Stingley passed on at age 55. His body finally gave out from pneumonia and heart trouble linked to that old injury. Next up, we got a legend who had to bow out way too early on account of a bad break. Bo Jackson. Back in the late 80s, Bo wasn't just a star, he was a force of nature, a powerhouse tearing it up in both the NFL and Major League Baseball. The man was basically Superman in cleats. But in January 1991, a single play brought one of the greatest careers of all time crashing down. It happened during a playoff scrap with the Cincinnati Bengals. Bo was moving like a bat out of hell when linebacker Kevin Walker tangled him up in an awkward tackle. In one horrible second, Bo's hip popped out and cracked the socket. He didn't holler or nothing. He didn't even know how bad of a pickle he was in. Lying there in the dirt, he just jammed his hip back into place, figuring it was a minor sting, but on the inside, everything was wrecked. The hit tore the blood vessels, choking off the flow to the bone. Within weeks, docs found out he had avascular necrosis, fancy talk for the bone dying because it wasn't getting any blood. That news ended his football days right then and there. Bo tried to fight it, bless his heart. He got a hip replacement and even made a miraculous comeback to baseball with the White Sox and Angels, but the old magic just wasn't there anymore. He retired at just 32. Next, we got a player who had to give up his dream due to a truly terrifying accident, Dennis Byrd. On November 29, 1992, Jets defensive end Dennis Byrd lined up for what looked like just another play against the Kansas City Chiefs. Dennis Byrd was a hoss, plain and simple, 26 years young and sitting pretty with 27 sacks to his name, but he chased down that quarterback one last time and hung up his cleats forever. Byrd went diving in to nail Dave Krieg, just as his own teammate Scott Mercereau came barreling in like a freight train from the other side. Before you could blink, those helmets smacked together head-on with enough force to shake the ground. That hit crushed Bird's C5 vertebra to dust, leaving him paralyzed from the neck down quicker than lightning strikes, with nothing moving but a twitch in his right arm. When Kyle Clifton ran over to check on him, Byrd whispered something that'd break your heart. "I don't reckon I can, Kyle. I believe I'm paralyzed." They rushed him straight to Lenox Hill Hospital, where them surgeons fought for 7 long hours just to get his spine stable. The doctors gave him the bad news, said he'd likely never stand on his own 2 feet again, but Byrd, he wasn't having none of that. After months of working his tail off in rehab, the man pulled off a miracle and walked. When he came back to the Meadowlands the next year, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Folks still call it one of the greatest moments in Jets history. Sporting a neck brace, Byrd marched right out to the 50-yard line all by himself as honorary captain, standing tall as a beacon of pure grit and guts. He never strapped on a helmet again, but his legend got bigger than the game itself. He penned his story in Rise and Walk, touching the hearts of millions with his unshakable faith and drive. They retired his number 90 jersey back in 2012, and now the Dennis Byrd Award goes to the Jets player showing the most heart every single year. It breaks my heart to say it, but Byrd passed away in a car wreck in 2016, only 50 years old. Now, let's shift gears to an NFL legend known for one of the most stomach-churning injuries we ever did see, Joe Theismann. It was November 18th, 1985, and millions of folks were glued to their TVs for Monday Night Football to watch the Washington Redskins square off against the New York Giants. But what they saw that night was pure nightmare fuel, the leg break that ended Joe Theismann's career right then and there. Early in the second quarter, Washington tried to pull a fast one with a flea flicker, but linebacker Lawrence Taylor wasn't fooled one bit. Just as Theismann wound up to throw, Taylor came crashing in, driving his knee straight into Theismann's right leg. His tibia and fibula snapped like dry twigs, bending his leg in a way nature never intended, and the crack was so loud it echoed all over RFK Stadium. Theismann later said it sounded like 2 muffled gunshots going off, and Taylor popped up instantly, waving his arms like a wild man screaming for the medics. Even Taylor knew that wasn't no regular hit, and players on both sides just stood there frozen in horror while the trainers scrambled onto the field. It was a compound fracture so nasty the bone tore right through the skin, and everybody knew Theismann's playing days were done the second he hit the turf. They hauled him off to George Washington University Hospital to patch up his shattered leg, but despite months of trying to get right, Theismann never played another down of football. That play is still one of the most talked about wrecks in sports history, but funny enough, Theismann calls it a blessing in disguise. That injury steered him toward a mighty fine career in broadcasting and business. Next up, we got another player who found a silver lining in a terrible accident. Let's talk about Mike Utley. On November 17, 1991, this Detroit Lions lineman got caught up in one of the scariest scenes the NFL has ever witnessed. It was the fourth quarter against the Los Angeles Rams, and Utley was blocking when Rams defender David Rocker jumped up to swat a pass. In a heartbeat, Rocker came down hard right on top of Utley's head, crushing his 5th, 6th, and 7th cervical vertebrae and leaving him paralyzed from the neck down. The whole stadium went dead silent, and as they carted him off, Utley flashed a thumbs up to the crowd, an image folks round here won't ever forget. Even though he could move his arms a bit, his football days were over before the final whistle blew, and Utley remembers that moment clear as day. He knew right away something was terribly wrong, saying, "I lost the feeling in my arms and back, but I never lost my strength. This time, it was just taken from me." Despite the heartbreak, he refused to wallow in pity, leaning on the good Lord, his kin, and his teammates to keep his chin up. The Lions stood by him thick and thin, making sure he didn't spend a minute feeling sorry for himself. After retiring, Utley poured his heart into helping folks, starting the Mike Utley Foundation to fund research and guide families learning to live with paralysis. Looking back, Utley is full of thanks, saying football took very little from him but gave him a whole lot more. Now, hold on to your hats, because this next player nearly lost his life right on the field. That brings us to Reggie Brown. Back in December of 1997, this Detroit Lions linebacker suffered a spinal cord injury so bad it nearly sent him to the pearly gates. They were playing the New York Jets when Brown dove in to tackle running back Adrian Murrell. In a split-second wreck, the top of Brown's helmet smashed into the back of a falling lineman, Lamont Burns, causing a massive bruise on his spinal cord. The hit was so vicious Brown was paralyzed instantly and couldn't draw a breath, turning blue as he lay still as a stone on that turf. The Lions medical team moved like lightning, with linebacker Antonio London hollering for help while head trainer Kent Falb rushed in. Dr. Terry Locke started life-saving CPR right there on the grass, and they rushed Brown to Pontiac General Hospital, where the poor guy was out cold for nearly 45 minutes. At first, things looked okay, but deeper tests showed his top 2 neck bones were out of whack, meaning he needed emergency surgery to fuse them back together. The weeks that followed were a hard road, as he had to learn everything all over again, from walking to simply brushing his teeth. As he slowly got his strength back, just standing up and taking a few steps felt like running a whole marathon. Brown never played pro ball again, but bless his heart, he got well enough to walk and live a normal life. Next, we got a story about a player who actually lost a piece of himself during a game. Meet Rashad Johnson. In 2013, this Arizona Cardinals safety suffered one of the weirdest and nastiest injuries we've seen in a Coon's age. It happened during a punt return when Johnson broke loose from a block to help make a tackle. Going full tilt, his finger got crushed and severed right off, leaving the tip gone down to the knuckle, and Johnson didn't even realize how bad it was because his glove hid the mess. It wasn't until he peeled that glove off on the sideline that he saw the tip of his finger was missing, with the bone showing plain as day. After the game, the docs had to shave down that exposed bone to stop infection and stitch it up tight, as there wasn't no way to put that fingertip back on. Now, most folks would have folded like a cheap tent, but Johnson stayed tough as a $2 steak, looking that injury in the eye and declaring he still had 9 good fingers, which was plenty enough to get the job done. He climbed right back in the saddle and hit the gridiron, proving that it takes a whole lot more than a gruesome scar to keep a real player off the field. Y'all let us know what you reckon about that kind of grit down in the comments. Before you mosey on down the road, make sure you mash that like button and hitch your wagon to NFL Facts so you do not miss the next big yarn we spin.